scary story instead. It was a very dark evening, and I felt something really bad was going to happen. And it's a Uber experience. Maybe that's why Uber is not that popular here in Germany. Now, Uber is an app, for those of you who have never used it. It's an app where you can book a car and it will pick you up wherever and drop you off at a specific place. And you pay everything over the app. It's very convenient. It's very popular in the US. That's why last Christmas when Mike and I were visiting my brother in San Francisco, we used Uber quite a lot. Almost every day we would book an Uber to drive us home. So one evening we booked an Uber and we got picked up by this white Toyota Prius by Sanjeev, I don't know. And we started talking with the driver, and the driver started to tell us that he used to be in the military, okay? But he spoke really slowly, almost in a creepy way. And at one point, he even stopped at a traffic light, and he wouldn't move for a long time. When the traffic light turned green, it's not moving. It's turned red again. It's turned green again. And it just felt like eternity before we started driving again. And at that point, Mike and I already had this kind of uneasy feeling, like something strange about this guy. And because we know the way home very well, we know exactly where he should turn to go to the highway. But he didn't make that turn. Instead, he drove up on this hill, a very quiet hill. Now it's already 11 p.m. in the evening, so it's very dark. And he's driving and driving, makes several turns. And at that time, I was really panicking. I was really scared. What is he taking us? And all of a sudden, he stopped the car. And now you have to know, this is America. And so he took out a gun. No, I'm just kidding. That last part didn't happen. But who was this mysterious guy? What did he want from me? Now we've been going through, oh, by the way, first quiz of the day. Does anyone recognize where this music comes from?
Stranger Things.
Stranger Things, yes, yes. We have some Netflix fans here. We've been going through a sermon series on Jacob's life. And it's one of the most amazing stories of the Bible, in my opinion. And as in all great stories, it's progressing into a climax. And right here in this climax, we're also going to see a mysterious guy appearing in the story. And I'm very thankful that Donnie asked me to talk about this part of the sermon series, this part about Jacob's life, because this is where it all comes together. This is where Jacob changed his life strategy and solved all his problems, all because of this encounter with this mysterious man. Now let's summarize what happened so far. Jacob was one of the patriarchs of the Bible. That means he was chosen to carry God's promise. Now if you were to give a headline for his life, it would be fighting for blessing. That's what his life is all about. Even though before he was born, God already chose him and revealed to his parents that, hey, it is the younger son Jacob, not Esau, who is going to be chosen to carry God's promise. But unlike Esau, who was very hairy, Jacob was very smooth. So is his character. Starting at his birth, as Esau and Jacob were coming out of the mother's womb, Jacob was already grabbing on to Esau's heels. And that's how he got his name Jacob, because Jacob means he grasped. But interestingly, Jacob also means, as an idiom, a deceiver, a liar, a cheater. And that's just who he is in his entire life. He's a trickster who used his own ways to get what he wanted. He tricked his brother Esau to sell him his birthright. He lied to his father Isaac to steal the firstborn's blessing. And because he cheated on Esau, Esau was very upset. And Esau said, I swear I'm going to kill this Jacob. And so Jacob, starting at that point on, had to escape. And that means that he was farther and farther and farther away from the very promise from God. He had to leave his land, he had to leave his parents, and he had to escape all the way to his uncle Laban's place, all the way in Baghdad, as Esther told us. And there, he was being cheated on, and he had to labor 14 years to get his beautiful wife, Rachel. Now there he did prosper, but again, that wasn't really God's promise for him. God's promise was that he would take him back to his father's land, and there, all the people on earth will be blessed through him, because the Messiah is going to come from his family. Now, throughout Jacob's life, we never really see anything that we can emulate. He's not particularly honest, he's not really brave, he's not a big hero. And 20 years later, God told Jacob, I want you to go back to your father's land. And so Jacob took everything he had, his kids, his wife, and all his possessions, and he started to move back to his father's land. But that also means meeting Esau, the person who stood on his way from getting his blessings, the person who's been trying to kill Jacob. So Jacob was very scared. He's finally going to face that person he's been running away from. But Jacob had a plan. Jacob always had a plan. And that is that he would send a messenger ahead of him to tell Esau that, I'm coming, but I have a lot of gift for you. A lot of gift. And the messenger then come back and report back and said, yeah, Esau got the message, all right. In fact, he's going to come meet you right now. But with his 400 men, at that point, Jacob was like, oh no, this is bad. This is about to go down. And so Jacob continued to send wave after wave after wave of kids, hundreds of donkeys, cows, goats, in order to pacify Esau. At the same time, Esau divided his family into two camps. So in case that Esau would attack one of them, at least the other one would escape. He got everything all planned out. He's very smart, but at the same time, he's very stressed out. He's very, very afraid. And right here, it's where the mysterious man appeared. And right here is where we're going to pick up the climax of this story, of one of the most amazing stories in the Bible. It's a very short passage, but with such skillful storytelling, because this is where it all comes together. This is where Jacob changed his life and changed his perspective forever. So let's go into today's passage in Genesis chapter 32, verses 21 to 31. Now, this is about a fight. This is about a wrestling match between Jacob and this mysterious man. So by the time we finish reading this passage, I want you to tell me who won in this battle. Genesis chapter 32. So the present passed on before him, while he himself spent that night in the camp. Now he arose that same night and took his 2 wives and his 2 maids and his 11 children and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and he sent across whatever he had. Then Jacob was left alone, and the men wrestled with him until daybreak. When he saw that he had not prevailed against him, he touched the socket of his thigh. So the socket of Jacob's thigh was dislocated while he wrestled with him. Then he said, let me go, for the dawn is breaking. But he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. So he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. He said, your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked him and said, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it that you're asking my name? And he blessed him there. So Jacob named the place Peniel, for he said, I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been preserved. Now the sun rose upon him just as he crossed over Peniel, and he was limping on his thigh. So, who won? First, let's look at the evidence first. On verse 25, it says that the man had not prevailed against him. Or in another translation, it says that the man could not overpower Jacob. So 1 point for Jacob, I guess. But in the same verse, it says the man just touched his thigh and he's crippled for life. says, the man asked for permission to go. Let me go. The dawn is breaking. Later on, the man even gave him a new name, Israel, which means you have striven with God and with men, and you have prevailed. So, who do you think won this battle? Show me with your fists if you think it was Jacob that won, because he grasped, right? Or if you think it was the mysterious man who won, then show me with an open palm. Ready? Go. Who won? Oh, okay. Jacob, open palm, Jacob. Oh, well, half and half. Okay, fist, open palm. Thank you. The answer is, you're all correct. Because they both won. But they both won by losing. They both won through weakness. By the end of the passage, we know that Jacob was wrestling with God. So this passage tells us not only the condition to encounter God, but the secret to winning with him. Now, by the time we get to this passage, we see that Jacob is already coming to an end of his own wit. And for the first time in his life, he's feeling really helpless. And he started to cry out to God, which he's never really done before. And he started to lay out all his fears in front of God. He said, God, save me from my brother Esau. He's trying to kill me and my family. Now, at the beginning of the passage, if you remember, Jacob started to send over everything he had. He sent his wife across to the other side of the Jabbok. He sent his children and everything he had to the other side of the stream. But up to this point, these were all the things that have defined who Jacob was. I mean, he lied, he cheated, he labored just to get those things. But right here in this moment, he was left completely alone. There is nothing he could hide behind anymore. And it is right here in this moment that the mysterious guy jumped in and wrestled with him. This is the condition. We encounter God when we become absolutely vulnerable before him. A lot of times when we hear religious or non-religious people talk about spirituality, and oftentimes they describe it as a search for peace. I want to find my center. I want to be in tune with myself. I want to feel good about myself. That's what spirituality is all about, right? But right here in this story, in this encounter with God, we saw that Jacob was completely knocked off balance. He was injured. And he was described as a wrestling match. Now, I don't know so much about wrestling, so I have to look it up. So if I made a mistake, blame Wikipedia. Wrestling is a very intense sport. It requires you to focus, it uses every part of your body, and you win by either gaining a superior position over the other, or if your opponent submits to you, or if your opponent is completely knocked out. And the two wrestlers are always contradicting each other. So if one person wants to move up, the other one wants to pin it down right away. But if the other person moves like this and you follow, that's not wrestling, that's dancing. And sometimes I wonder why God couldn't just come down and have a little nice talk with Jacob, right? Jacob, it's me you're looking for, okay? It's not Rachel, it's not the land, it's me you're looking for, okay? Yeah? Yeah, and Jacob would say, okay, and that would save them a lot of time. But no, they were fighting. And God had to wrestle away Jacob's self-reliance. And sometimes we hear people use the phrase, oh, I'm struggling with something. I'm wrestling with an issue. Like a few years ago, I was wrestling with my career. I moved to a new place, I took a new job, and I was very unhappy, very unfulfilled. Because, how do I put this? My boss was really stupid. And I prayed to God, I said, I was doing very well in Singapore. Why did you bring me here? And why do I now have to deal with this stupid person in my life? But I wasn't wrestling with God. I was just complaining. Because I wasn't vulnerable enough to let God tell me, hey, Joanne, look at who you've become. Look how proud you are. Ouch. called you to love the people around you, but you're not. I called you to bear fruit like joy and patience, but you don't have any of it. Do you remember what the second commandment says? The first commandment is, thou shalt not have any God before me. And the second commandment is, thou shalt not make for yourself a carved image of anything that's in heaven or on earth. That means God is not who we make him to be. Wrestling with God means not only do you contradict God, yes, you can bring your questions and bring your doubt to God and ask him, but at the same time, you have to be honest and vulnerable enough for God to contradict you and tell you you're wrong. Have you ever had a true encounter with God? Have you ever stood in front of God and just be completely open and vulnerable before him? Now, usually in a wrestling match, it only lasts for a few minutes, because after a few minutes of wrestling, you are done. You are just exhausted. And right before the wrestling match, usually there's a scale. And both wrestlers have to get on the scale to make sure that they are of the same weight class, right? Just to be fair. Again, I don't have much wrestling experience, but the closest thing I've done is Krav Maga. Does anyone know what that is? Krav Maga? Yeah, you've done it. I know. So it's a self-defense fighting technique derived from wrestling. And so one time Mike and I were in a Krav Maga class. And just so you know the difference in size, I'm just going to ask Mike to stand here. So one time we were sparring partners for each other. So I was punching him, no problem. But then we had to switch. And so I had my shield up, right? I was holding my shield like this. And he started to throw these lame punches at me. I was like, babe, what are you doing? You're punching like a girl. I got this. Just hit me like you normally would. And then he was like, no, babe, I'm not going to hit you. I don't want to hit you. I said, no, you have to just hit me right now. And then Mike started to throw this punch at me using maybe 10% of his strength. And I ended up like 2 meters away, very upset, and we were never partners again. Not in Krav Maga, at least. The point is, if you are wrestling with someone who's 30, 50 kilograms heavier than you, then it's over in a few seconds. But in this story, Jacob and this mysterious man, they were wrestling for hours from the evening until daybreak. That can only mean that they were matching in power. But who is this guy? I mean, Jacob must have thought, wait, is this Esau trying to kill me right now? Is it Esau's bodyguard? But there were a couple of clues that tells us who this person may be. And that is in the same verse when it says, the man had not prevailed against him. The man just touched his thigh and he's crippled for life. The Hebrew word for touch is exactly what it sounds like. With the lightest of contact. Ding. His thigh is gone. It didn't say he smashed his thigh. It didn't say he crushed him. Ding. That's it. And that's when we know that this person has incredible power. That's when Jacob knows he's not wrestling with an ordinary man. Jacob realized he was wrestling with the Almighty God incarnated, someone whom he cannot see face to face, otherwise he will die. Jacob thought he had been fighting with Esau, not just that night, but in his entire life. It was Esau who was standing between him and his blessing. Jacob thought, tomorrow when I meet Esau, that's the climax of my life. No, it's tonight. God is telling Jacob, you have been wrestling with me your entire life. But Jacob was not the only one who's wrestling with God and fighting against God in his life. When Isaac, Jacob's dad Isaac, was old and he was almost blind, he was ready to give his blessing to his favorite son Esau. But Jacob came in and stole the blessing. A few minutes later, Esau came in and said, Dad, this is the food I prepared. Remember your favorite meal? Huh? They almost said. Now you can bless me. And then, at that time, the Bible says Isaac started to tremble. violently. And he said, "Who was it that came before you? I ate the food, I blessed him. Oh, and indeed, he will be blessed." Why was he trembling violently? It was not because of anger. He could have easily taken back the blessing. All that didn't count. It was because Isaac realized it was God who did this. He realized that he has been wrestling with God and he had been fighting against the prophets because he didn't like it. Until now, he realized there is no way he could have fought against his divine power. And so he repented and said, "Indeed, Jacob will be blessed." And at the end, all he could do is to surrender. And in the same way, Jacob realized he had been wrestling with God all his life and he had been fighting against him because he never trusted God. He never trusted God would keep his promise. And I think that's just not Isaac, it's not just Jacob, it's all of us. Sometimes we take things into our own hands and we get our idea of blessing and we hold on to it so tight. Jacob's self-will was so strong that God had to come and wrestle with him. But how much does God weigh? How much does omnipotence weigh? They can only fight for so long because God was holding back his power. God voluntarily made himself weak. Jacob realized that this mysterious man could have knocked him out easily, but he didn't. Instead, he was fighting with him in grace and in love. And so Jacob held on to him and said, "Please bless me." And then God did something really cool. It's really interesting. It's really random. He said, "What's your name?" And now we know God never asked a question for him to gain information. It's like, "Wait, who are you? Jacob?" Sorry, I jumped the wrong guy. Sorry. No, that's not what he's doing. But this question is so clever. Because many years ago, that same question was asked to Jacob. When he went to steal the blessing, Isaac was really blind and couldn't see anything. And he asked, "Who are you? Who is this?" And at that time, Jacob said, "I am Esau, your firstborn." And this time, in front of God, he said, "I am Jacob." And you could almost picture Jacob hearing it loud and clear. "Yep, I'm Jacob. I'm a deceiver, a liar. I've been a cheater all my life." God asked this question really for him. It was almost Jacob's confession. "I have been doing only bad things in my life and you didn't knock me out?" And it is right here in Jacob's weakest moment that God turned to him and said, "You win." And then God gave Jacob a new name and said, "You're no longer Jacob. You are Israel." And the meaning of Israel is a prince who triumphs with God. But how? How did Jacob win? Because of his change in life's strategy. From a man who takes things into his own hands, he now hold on to God and said, "I am not going to let you go until you bless me." Before he was fighting against God, now he's fighting with God. Jacob was holding on in weakness, and in surrendering, he wins. But why? Why is it even possible that Jacob, someone like Jacob, to stand before a holy God and not get crushed, but only get a strike of grace? That's because the story is not over yet. There's another person in the story, remember? The mysterious guy? He also won and got what he wanted through weakness. But first, let's go back to my mysterious guy, right? Well, what did that Uber driver really want from me? Let's finish that story first. So we were driving on this hill, and I was really scared, and I was like looking at Mike, like, "What are you gonna do now?" And I actually told the driver, "I'm sorry, where are we going? Because this is not the way home." And then the guy took out, not a gun, but a cell phone, a mobile phone, and he said, "Ma'am, I'm just picking up another passenger because you ordered Uber Pool, which is a carpool service offered by Uber. Yes, I ordered that because I was being cheap, but in my defense, the app didn't tell me that we're going to pick up another passenger. But what did God, showing up as a mysterious man, really wanted in this story? What did he want? God wanted to save Jacob. He wanted to give Jacob a changed heart. He wanted to give him a changed life. It says God hadn't prevailed against him because if God were to come in full power, he would have knocked Jacob out and he would have won the battle. But he would have lost Jacob forever. That's the last thing that he wanted. So instead, he came in weakness, held back his power, and just give him a touch of grace on the thigh. And he won Jacob over with his mercy. But okay, well, why the thigh? Why not break his arm or hurt his shoulder? Well, Bible concordance tells us that there's a lot of symbolism on the thigh. The thigh represents procreation and offspring. Remember when Abraham sends out his servants to go find a wife for Isaac? He said, I want you to swear on my thigh that you will not find a woman from the land of Canaan. That means he's saying, I want you to swear on the life of my grandchildren, on the life of my offspring, that you will not do that. So when God touched and dislocated Jacob's thigh, it means that God is going to strike one of Jacob's descendants. What does that point us to? The cross, the gospel. It is pointing us to the ultimate place where God triumphed through weakness on the cross. Because centuries later, on another dark night, a descendant of Jacob became completely lonely and vulnerable in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus held back his power and made himself weak by becoming human. The God who is full of glory gets mocked by the thieves. The God who is the living water becomes thirsty on the cross. The God who is almighty becomes very afraid, even more afraid than Jacob. The Bible said Jesus fell with his face to the ground and he prayed to God 3 times and he said, my Father, please take this cup away from me. Yet, not as I will, but as you will. And on that dark night in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus really wrestled for us. Wrestle with what? With the full weight of God's justice. And Jesus surrendered. How is it possible that God can bless someone like Jacob who deserved to be cursed? Because God cursed someone who deserved to be blessed. Jacob only get a strike of grace on the thigh because in Isaiah chapter 53 it says Jesus instead was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. And on the cross, he got it all. Got it all. And when Jesus was wrestling with the full weight of God's justice, he held on. You see, Jacob was holding on. He held on at the risk of his life, and he said, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. Jesus held on at the cost of his life, and he said, I'm not going to let you go until we get the blessing, so that we can see God face to face, and we can not get crushed, that our life can be preserved. And as the sun rose above Jacob, a new day has begun. Jacob learned to let go of his grip on Esau finally, and he held on to God. Because he finally realized that the blessing he's been looking for, it's not the land, it's not Rachel, it's not the children, it's not power. What he's holding on to now was the forgiveness that he desperately needed from his brother Esau, but could never have. What he's holding on to now is the beauty that he's been looking for in his wives, but couldn't find. what he was holding on to now is the perfect love that he wanted from his father Isaac but never had. What are you holding on to? Are you chasing after God for his blessings, or are you chasing after God just to have God himself? Jacob would rather have all his bones broken than to let go. And that's the secret to be blessed. To be broken, to be poor in spirit, to be meek before God. To surrender is victory. And by daybreak, the blessing will come. Now maybe you say, I don't know who is this mysterious guy you're talking about, but I am struggling with something. Maybe it is God trying to turn your eyes to him at this point of pain, and he wants to give you a new name. Pastor Donnie is here to pray with you. We have face-to-face team to pray with you if you need it. Or maybe you say, I know who God is. I have encountered him, but I've never really been absolutely vulnerable before him. Where in your life would you say you are taking things in your own hands and you've been fighting with your own strength? And to that, God says, hold on to me. Stop fighting against me, but with me. You can surrender to me because I've already lost everything just to have you. Let's pray. Dear Lord, I thank you for being a God who not only allow us to wrestle with you, not only being a God who would wrestle with us, but also wrestle for us. Thank you for taking the weakness that could really kill us. And you take that away by surrendering and dying on the cross. And we thank you for that incredible love that you have for us. And I just pray that your word will change us. I pray that we would feel your love in a very real way, and that our life can be changed, that we will hold on to you forever and ever. We thank you for this time. Thank you for your word. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.